I smoothed the fabric of the navy blue dress I had bought specifically for the occasion, phone pressed to my ear. "Where should I sit at your graduation?" I asked, looking at the silver necklace I planned to wear with it. Clara hesitated. The silence on the line stretched so long I could hear the faint hum of my refrigerator in the kitchen. "Mom," she finally murmured. It was last week. I stopped moving. My hand hovered over the dress. "Last week? But you told me it was the 24th. Another pause, heavier this time. "Greg thought it would be better this way." Clara muttered, her voice dropping as if she were afraid someone in her apartment might hear her. "He said you ask too many questions about money. He said you'd embarrass us in front of his family." I slowly sank onto the edge of my bed. I had paid for every single credit of Clara's master's degree in healthcare administration. When she and Greg struggled with rent because Greg decided to quit his job to find his true passion, I paid their lease. I had deposited the tuition money directly into her account before every semester, so she wouldn't have to take out loans. Who was there? I kept my voice perfectly level. "Just Greg's parents and his sister," she answered quickly. "Mom, please don't make this a big deal." The ceremony was boring anyway. "I'll come over this weekend and we can celebrate just us." She wanted to celebrate the degree I financed after hiding the ceremony to protect the fragile ego of her husband. Greg never liked me because I didn't pretend he was a genius. I just saw him as a man who refused to work. "I see," I replied quietly. "Are you mad? Are you mad Greg said you'd make this about you?" "I'm not mad, Clara. I have to go." I ended the call. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't weep into the navy blue dress. Instead, I stood up, walked down the hall to my home office, and opened my laptop. It was time to look at my bank accounts. The glow of the computer screen illuminated the quiet room. I logged into my primary banking portal, navigating straight to the recurring transfers page. For 2 years, I had maintained a steady flow of support. $3,000 on the first of every month for their rent and utilities. Another $500 on the 15th for groceries linked to a joint credit card I allowed Clara to keep in her wallet. And then there were the tuition bursts, large lump sums transferred at the start of every semester. I opened a new tab and typed Clara's name into social media. I rarely checked it, preferring actual phone calls, but today I needed to see. Right there on Greg's public page was a photo album titled "My Brilliant Wife." There was Clara glowing in her cap and gown. Next to her stood Greg looking smug in a tailored suit. And flanking them were Greg's parents, Susan and Tom, holding massive bouquets of expensive lilies. The caption read, "So proud of my wife. We sacrificed so much for this day. Couldn't have done it without the support of my amazing parents." I stared at the words. We sacrificed. His parents. I returned to the banking tab. With a few deliberate clicks, I canceled the recurring $3,000 transfer. Next, I navigated to the credit card portal. I reported Clara's authorized card as lost and requested that the account be locked entirely. Finally, I logged into the cellular provider and removed their 2 phone numbers from my family plan, effective at midnight. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt incredibly clear-headed. For years, I had treated Clara's marriage as a delicate glass sculpture, tiptoeing around Greg's arrogance just to keep my daughter close. I had allowed my money to be the glue holding their lifestyle together. I closed the laptop and walked into the kitchen to make a cup of tea. I just needed to wait. It usually took Greg exactly 4 days to notice when the financial invisible hand stopped catching his falls. 4 days later, the doorbell rang. I was in the living room reading a novel, a fresh cup of coffee resting on the coaster beside me. I marked my page, stood up, and walked to the front door. Clara and Greg stood on my porch. Clara looked anxious, shifting her weight from foot to foot. Greg looked exactly as he always did, annoyed to be in my presence, checking his watch, as if he had a boardroom to run instead of a couch to sit on. Mom, hi. Clara forced a bright smile. Can we come in? Of course I stepped aside. They walked into the kitchen and sat at the island. I did not offer them coffee. I sat across from them, folding my hands on the granite counter. So Greg started leaning forward and resting his elbows on the island. Clara's university is being ridiculous. They have this administrative hold on her physical diploma and her final transcript. We need it for her job applications. An administrative hold? I asked mildly. Clara swallowed hard. There's a final balance on the student account. $8,000. The portal won't release the degree until it's cleared. I simply looked at her. I had transferred the exact amount for her final semester's tuition 3 months ago. We just need a check, Jacqueline Gregg added smoothly, using my first name as he always did to assert some bizarre dominance. If you write it today, Clara can run it to the bursar's office. It's just a formality. He expected me to open my drawer, pull out my checkbook, and hand over the money like a silent ATM. He had absolutely no idea that I had spent the last 4 days reviewing everything. I see, I nodded. I stood up and walked over to the desk, tucked in the corner of the kitchen. I opened the top drawer and pulled out a thick white envelope. I walked back and slid it across the granite counter toward Greg. He smirked, reaching for it. Appreciate it. We'll pay you back when Clara gets her director role. He tore the envelope open, expecting a check. He didn't know what I had actually put inside. Greg tipped the envelope upside down. Instead of a check, a stack of printed papers slid onto the counter. He frowned, picking up the top sheet. It was a screenshot of the banking portal showing the canceled monthly transfer. The second page was the confirmation of the terminated credit card. The third was the notice from the phone company showing their lines had been disconnected from my plan. "What is this?" Greg demanded, his face flushing dark red. "Those are your new financial realities," I answered, leaning back in my chair. Clara grabbed the papers, her eyes scanning the bold letters. "Mom, the rent transfer. It's canceled. And my card declined at the grocery store yesterday. I thought it was a glitch. It wasn't a glitch." I kept my tone perfectly even. "I am no longer funding your household." Greg slammed his hand on the counter. "You're cutting us off because you're throwing a tantrum over a graduation ceremony." It was one afternoon. Jacqueline, grow up. I am completely grown, Greg. That is why I know how to manage my own money. I looked at Clara. "I transferred your final tuition payment 3 months ago. Where did it go?" Clara looked at her lap. Greg stepped in, puffing his chest. "We had unexpected expenses. My car needed a transmission fix, and we had to put down a deposit for a networking retreat. It was an investment in our future. You bought a car with my daughter's tuition money," I corrected him. "And then you hid the graduation from me so I wouldn't be there to ask the university why the account had a balance." "My parents helped us with the retreat," Greg shot back. "They actually support us without strings attached." "That's wonderful," I smiled slightly. "Then your parents can write the check for the $8,000 you owe the university, and the $3,000 you need for rent next week." "You can't do this," Clara whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I already did, Clara. The envelope is yours to keep." I knew Greg's pride wouldn't let him accept defeat quietly. He had always viewed my house as an extension of his own property. My late husband Robert had left behind a garage full of high-end woodworking tools and a pristine riding lawnmower. Greg had borrowed them frequently and returned them broken or not at all. The morning after I handed them the envelope, I called a local locksmith. By noon, every exterior door on my house had a shiny, new deadbolt. At 2 o'clock the following afternoon, while Clara was at her part-time clinic shift, a familiar truck pulled into my driveway. I stood by the kitchen window, watching through the blinds. Greg stepped out, looking agitated. He walked up to the side door, the one he always used, and slid his key into the lock. He jiggled it. He pulled it out, inspected it, and shoved it back in, twisting harder. The lock didn't budge. He pounded his fist against the heavy wooden door. I didn't flinch. I poured myself a glass of iced water and walked to the entryway, opening the wooden door, but keeping the heavy metal security screen locked between us. "The key is sticking," he snapped, clearly frustrated. "Open the door. Jacqueline, I need to grab Robert's air compressor. I've got a guy who wants to buy it." "Robert's air compressor belongs to me," I replied calmly through the mesh. "And it is not for sale. Clara said I could use it." "Clara doesn't own this house, Greg. Neither do you." He glared at me, his hands on his hips. You're being completely unreasonable. We need cash. If you won't give it to us, the least you can do is let me sell some old junk you don't even use." "The locks are changed," I stated, ignoring his demand entirely. "Do not come to this house again without calling first. If you try to force the door, I will not hesitate to handle it as a break-in." He stood on the porch, staring at the new deadbolt, finally realizing this wasn't a negotiation. He spun around, cursed under his breath, and drove away. 3 days later, I received a text from Clara. "Mom, please, can we just sit down and talk neutral ground?" The diner on 4th Street. 6 p.m. I agreed. I drove to the diner, anticipating Clara would bring Greg. I was prepared for that. What I wasn't prepared for was walking into a booth to find Clara sitting next to Greg, with Greg's parents, Susan and Tom, sitting across from them. It was an ambush. I didn't turn around. I walked to the end of the table and pulled up a spare wooden chair sitting slightly apart from their group. The waitress came over immediately and I ordered a black coffee. Jacqueline Susan began, her tone dripping with fake sympathy. "We wanted to intervene before this family rift gets any worse. Clara is just beside herself." "There is no rift, Susan," I answered. "There is simply a change in my financial budget." Tom cleared his throat. "Now look, Greg told us you cut off their rent over a misunderstanding about graduation. Family supports? Family Jacqueline. We pay for their networking trips. You cover the domestic side." That was the balance. "The balance," I repeated. "I see. Greg, did you tell your parents where the $8,000 for Clara's tuition went?" Greg looked sharply at his plate. Susan frowned. "Greg said the university overcharged them." "No," I looked directly at Susan. "I transferred the exact tuition amount to Clara's account. Greg spent it on a car deposit and your weekend trips. Now the university won't release the degree. They brought you here to shame me into paying for it a second time." Susan stared at Greg, her mouth slightly open. Tom shifted uncomfortably in the vinyl booth. "Mom, stop," Clara pleaded. I stood up. The waitress arrived with my coffee. I handed her a $5 bill. "Keep the change." I looked at the four of them. I have supported my daughter for years. I will not support a man who steals from her education to fund his lifestyle. Have a lovely dinner. As I walked to my car, I heard the diner door swing open. Clara chased after me, her panic finally breaking through her pride. "Mom, wait." Clara hurried across the asphalt, wrapping her cardigan tight against the evening chill. I unlocked my car door, but turned to face her. "What is it, Clara?" "You didn't have to humiliate him in front of his parents," she cried, her voice cracking. "They think we have it all together. You don't have it together. You are drowning in Greg's decisions." I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. She looked exhausted. The bright, ambitious girl who started the healthcare program was buried under the weight of keeping up appearances for a man who didn't work. "He needs this," she pleaded. "He promised he'll get a real job once my degree is cleared and I can get the director position. He just needs me to get that salary so we can qualify for a mortgage." He is waiting for you to become his mortgage plan, I corrected gently. Clara, I am your mother. I love you, but I will not set myself on fire to keep Greg warm. She wiped a tear from her cheek. What am I supposed to do? We don't have the rent for next week. I took a breath. I had thought about this for days. My house has 3 bedrooms. Yours is exactly how you left it. If you want to pack your bags and come home, my door is open. You can stay rent-free while you work your clinic job and pay off your tuition balance yourself. I will help you cook. I will help you budget. And you will have peace. She looked up, a flicker of hope in her eyes. And Greg is not permitted on my property. My offer is for you, Clara. Only you. The hope instantly vanished, replaced by a defensive wall. I'm not leaving my husband. You just want to control me. I want you to be safe, I answered calmly. But you are an adult. You get to choose. She took a step back, shaking her head. You're being incredibly selfish. I opened my car door. Goodbye, Clara. I closed the door, knowing it was the last time I would offer her a soft place to land. The first few weeks were quiet. I didn't reach out, and they didn't call. I spent my days reclaiming the space in my life that had been occupied by their constant crises. I started with the garage. My neighbor and good friend Martha came over on a Saturday morning with 2 coffees and a pair of work gloves. Together, we organized Robert's tools. We sold the large machinery to a local woodworking shop for a fair price. Then I dealt with the second car. A year ago, I had let Clara and Greg use my old Honda Civic because Greg claimed he needed it for interviews. I still held the title. I drove to their apartment complex with my spare key, started the Honda, and drove it directly to a used car lot. I sold it for $4,000 and deposited the money straight into my retirement account. When Clara called the next morning screaming that the car had been stolen, I answered simply, "It wasn't stolen. I sold it. It was in my name, Clara, and my insurance policy. You'll have to share Greg's car now." She hung up on me. I put the phone down and felt nothing. No guilt, no chest tightness. Just the quiet peace of a boundary maintained. Martha and I spent the rest of the week painting Clara's old bedroom a bright, cheerful yellow. I turned it into a proper guest room and reading space. I bought new curtains. I stopped checking my phone, waiting for a disaster. I realized how much of my daily energy had been consumed by dread. Will they need rent? Will Greg insult me? What excuse will they make this time? Without that dread, my days felt remarkably long and entirely my own. I joined a morning walking group. I read books I had been putting off. The house felt lighter, as if a thick layer of dust had finally been swept out the door. But Clara and Greg had one last, desperate move. A month after the diner incident, a heavy knock echoed through my house. I looked through the peephole. It was Greg and Clara. I opened the door, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Mom, open the door," Clara demanded, her voice tight. She looked thinner, the stress clearly taking a toll. "We can talk right here," I replied. Greg pushed his face near the gap. "Listen to me, Jacqueline. We are getting evicted. My parents refuse to help because of the lies you told them at the diner. Clara's university dropped her from the alumni network until the balance is paid. You have ruined everything. Your choices resulted in your eviction," I stated. "Not my boundaries." Clara pushed Greg aside slightly. "Mom, if you don't write a check right now to clear the university and give us the deposit for a new apartment, we are done. We will cut you out completely. When we have kids, you will never see your grandchildren. You will die alone in this house." She threw the words like a grenade, expecting me to dive on it. She expected the threat of loneliness to break me. Society tells mothers that we must endure any abuse to maintain access to our children. I looked at my daughter trapped in a cycle of her own, making weaponizing non-existent children to extort cash for a lazy man. I didn't flinch. "Clara," I said softly, my voice carrying no anger, only finality. "I love you. I will always love you. But I do not negotiate with terrorists. If never seeing me again is the price you choose to pay for staying with a man who uses you, then I accept your terms." Greg looked at Clara, expecting her to fix it, expecting her to deploy some magic words that would make my wallet open. But there was nothing left to fix. I gently closed the door, sliding the deadbolt into place. I walked back to the kitchen, poured my tea, and sat down. 6 months passed. The seasons changed, bringing a crisp autumn breeze through the windows of my yellow reading room. Life had settled into a beautiful, predictable rhythm. Martha and I took a 10-day trip to the coastal towns of Maine, paying for the vacation using the exact amount of money I used to send Clara and Greg for rent in a single month. I slept peacefully through the night, waking up without the knot of financial anxiety in my stomach. Through the grapevine of family friends, I heard fragments of Clara's reality. They had moved into a cramped one-bedroom apartment in a bad part of town. Greg had been forced to take a job at a hardware store entirely unrelated to his grand ambitions, while Clara picked up double shifts at the clinic just to keep the lights on. The university still held her degree captive. I didn't rejoice in her struggle. A mother never wants to see her child suffer. But I knew that shielding her from the consequences of her marriage would only prolong her captivity. One Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A text message lit up the screen. "Clara, Mom. Greg and I had a huge fight. He spent the electric bill money. I'm so tired. I'm sorry about graduation. I was just trying to keep the peace." I stared at the screen. A year ago, I would have grabbed my purse, driven to her apartment, paid the bill, and taken her out to lunch to soothe her feelings. I would have bought my way back into her good graces. Instead, I set my coffee mug down. I typed a reply. "Jacqueline, I love you, Clara. You are strong enough to figure this out. My door is open to you if you decide to leave. But I will not send money." I hit send. I didn't wait anxiously for a reply. I picked up my keys, walked out the front door, and locked it securely behind me. It was a beautiful morning for a walk, and I was exactly where I needed to be.